There is a type of anxiety disorder called agoraphobia, and basically what it means is we have a fear of crowds. Now, I don't know about you, but if you show me a photograph of a crowd, doesn't matter what the crowd is. Could be a crowd at a wedding, could be a crowd at a state fair, could be a crowd at a crowded street, could be a crowd of people at a workplace, doesn't matter. Wherever the crowd is, there's something inside of me that says, I don't want to be there. It stimulates anxiety. Now, I think what possibly happens with people with Asperger syndrome, with autism, is when we are repeatedly exposed to crowds that cause anxiety, ultimately that builds up and can lead to a meltdown. So what do we do? Well, I don't know about you, but what I do is I try to avoid crowds whenever possible. It's not always possible. I mean, people are all around. There's got to be around people sometime. I think you do, maybe not. I can't think of an example when you wouldn't. But when you were growing up, remember you went to school and you were surrounded by people. And if you have Asperger syndrome, there's a good possibility, with exceptions, but there's a good possibility that you were stressed out just being there by virtue of the fact that you were surrounded by people and you could not interact socially with the other children. That, I think, is agoraphobia, and it could lead to meltdown. What we're talking about is 5 things that, these stressors that possibly could cause us rather to melt down. Number 2 is what is called misophonia. That is the irritation that is caused by certain sounds. Now, there are some things like high-pitched noises that absolutely, positively drive me crazy. Don't want to hear them. Now, the weird thing about these high-pitched noises is most other people cannot hear them, but I can hear them. Or at least I used to be able to. As I get older, okay, maybe I'm losing some of that, but it's not just that. Nearly everybody has this to some degree, and if you're talking to somebody who is neurotypical, and they don't understand what misophonia is all about, they don't understand why you, as a person with Asperger syndrome, with high-functioning autism, they don't understand why these noises and sounds bother you so much, well, just remind them, if they're old enough to remember chalkboard, when your teacher would scratch her fingernail on the chalkboard and it would send shivers up everybody's spine. Now, a smart teacher who wanted to get her class attention, the attention of her class, all she had to do was scratch the chalkboard. Now, I never knew a teacher who actually did that, so I guess it doesn't matter now. I don't know if they even use chalkboards anymore, but most people can identify with that. Now, I know some people, they don't like to eat dinner with people who use silverware because of the sound of the metal scraping on their teeth. Maybe nobody likes that. I certainly don't like it. I know a guy who eats with chopsticks. I mean everything. If he eats it, he either uses his fingers, potato chips. But if it's not finger food, he uses chopsticks. What's wrong with that? Nothing. If it makes him comfortable. So when we hear these sounds and noises, sometimes lights, a lot of times lights. I don't like fireworks, for example. Well, they cause stress, they cause anxiety, and builds up, and what comes out is a meltdown. Number 3 is what I call, for lack of a better term, just mental exhaustion, being overwhelmed with a task. I got to do this task. I got to get it done. Doesn't matter what it is. If it's a task, it's something that I need to be done. Often I find it to be overwhelming. Well, here's an example. Say that my task is making this video, and I'm thinking, geez, I got to make a video. Come to think of it, I make several videos every day. It is a task. How do you do this? I mean, you're overwhelmed with these things that you've got to do, and I find that, making videos is really not that hard, because I have learned to break it down into segments. Segment number 1 is I do research and I make an outline. I come up with notes. You can see those on the side of the screen. Then I sit down, turn on my recording device, forget to turn off my air conditioner, which is that noise you hear in the background, and we're off and running. Okay, we got that done. So part 1 and part 2 are done. Part 3 then is doing the actual production, where I take the raw video, I put it into a software upload it to the software, and I edit it. That's where you see all the photographs of whatever you see in the screen. That's where that happens. Then I upload it to YouTube. So it's not overwhelming because I've broken it down into a lot of small little tasks. Makes it easy. And so the stress is not there. But I can recall throughout most of my school career, can we call that a career? One of the things that I found overwhelming was I got this entire school year, or maybe semester, to take this class. It was just overwhelming. Never occurred to me that I could break it down into, little segments, whatever. I wish I had thought of that when I was in school. Would have made school much easier. So what task do you have? Doesn't matter what it is. It may be overwhelming to you just thinking about it if you have Asperger syndrome, and the solution is take that task and break it down into small bits and just do a small bit. That's no big deal. You can do that. Okay, that bit's done, and what's next? Well, do the next bit. One of the great motivators for me is just thinking how relieved I'm going to be when the task is completed. And I've got this sense of relief that comes over me. And again, doesn't matter what the task is. Something that I may even have a proclivity to procrastinate because I really don't want to do this thing, but I found that reverse procrastination, that is, do it now so I don't have to do it later, works pretty good. And there's nothing like the good feeling of getting the job done and being done with it, being over with it, like, paying your bills. There, I'm done. Number 4 is what we call conversation anxiety. You probably knew we were going to talk about this before we even brought it up. Now, I got no problem with having a conversation with somebody if I'm interested in what we're talking about, and if the person I'm talking to is truly interested in listening to me, even though sometimes I got to admit I tend to ramble on about things, and I wonder why people sit there and endure my... Is this a conversation when I'm the only one talking and the other person just sitting across the table kind of staring at me like, are you going to be done with this? Well, maybe, because sometimes there's some interaction, so we have a true conversation, and if both parties are interested, I got no problem with that. Well, what about you? What about when you are trying to, or someone is trying to talk to you, and they're talking about something that, number 1, you have no interest in, number 2 is trivial, and number 3 is just kind of mundane? It seems like some people, it seems like a lot of people, neurotypical people, love to talk about nothing. What is this about? Nothing. One of my common responses, and I'm working on this, I'm trying to get better at this, but one of my common responses to mundane conversation is to respond by saying, I don't know, because people ask questions, and it should be, the answer should be obvious. So I don't know means, I talked about this in a video a couple months ago, but I don't know means, well, it could mean, I don't know, but usually it means something like, isn't that kind of obvious, or does that really matter? I mean, isn't this kind of nonsensical to even bring this up? Or can you not figure this out for yourself? You got to ask me. I mean, you are an adult. You have an IQ. You have intelligence, probably more so than me. Why are you asking me this? I don't know means I don't want to be bothered. I don't know means I don't want to think about it. Doesn't just mean I don't know, but another thing that I sometimes say is whatever. That may not be a question response, but when somebody just says something, whatever. That's not a very good way to have a conversation, but when you have Asperger syndrome, you have these little aversion techniques that make perfect sense to you, and you may use them so commonly you don't even know you're doing them, but we wonder why people think we're aloof. It's because when they try to have a conversation with us, I don't know, whatever, that's not much of a conversation, is it? But when we have this conversation anxiety, when people try to compel us into talking to them because, well, they want us to be typical. There's something, I've seen this all my life, when people try to conform me to be neurotypical. I just can't be. I mean, it's not that I'm resisting. It's not that I don't want to be. I don't want to be, but that's not the point. The point is that's just not me. So conversation anxiety, get enough of it, and that could trigger an episode where we have a meltdown. Number 5 is what we call clothing. Now, let's call it textile irritation, because it may not be clothing. Actually, it may not be textiles. I've mentioned a million times in past videos how I hated to get a haircut as a little kid. I still do. Because those tiny little hairs fall on you, and it's very irritating. Well, I did some research on this, and I wondered, why is it? Well, it turns out that our skin is populated with Merkel cells. And the job of Merkel cells is to inform our brain that whatever it is we're touching is not itchy. It is not irritating. It's perfectly okay. So you may have a bug crawling on you, and the Merkel cell, they don't say anything because they want you to be irritated, because that could be a harmful little bug crawling on you. Maybe it's something else that touches your skin that is discomfort, like heat. So your Merkel cells don't respond because they want you to react. They don't want to get in the way. But when you have something like clothing, like the shirt I'm wearing, or that little tag, they used to put in the back of t-shirts or other shirts, when that would irritate you, the Merkel cell is supposed to say, no, look, don't worry about this. But I think in some people, Merkel cells just don't work. Is that true in Aspies? Is that true in people with autism? I think maybe so. I think possibly we have malfunctioning Merkel cells. Look it up. You can Google it and read all about it. So no point in us taking a half hour to talk about Merkel cells, but suffice it to say that if you find certain textiles or hair or whatever to be itchy or annoying to the touch, it could be that your Merkel cells are not doing their job, because they're supposed to tell you it's perfectly okay to touch this. It's okay for this thing to touch you. But they're not doing their job. They're treating it like a bug. See those 2 rectangles on the screen? If you want our conversation to continue, all you got to do is click on one of those 2 rectangles and we'll keep hanging out. But if not, thanks for stopping by, and we see y'all next time.